Hey guys, what is up? Super K-Man Rocks here, and we are finally here. It is finally time for the start of the World Championships here in 2025. This is the play-in series. This is really, I guess, the last, non-World Series. Technically, it is a World Series, right? It's a play-in series for that 16th and final spot in the Swiss stage, but one of these teams is only going to get to play one best-of-5 at this tournament, and then they will be eliminated. The other, of course, moves on to that Swiss stage as the final team to enter it. I'm excited. I hope you guys are as well. It's finally World season. We've been waiting for this for so long. We've done so many preview videos, 2 major preview videos. If you haven't checked those out, please go ahead and watch them. The playlist for Worlds is going to be up in the iCard. In that playlist right now, it's going to be the top 20 players at World Championships list from this channel, and then, of course, my primer and power rankings video for every single team, every single player. It's a 2.5-hour long video. Everything you need to know about every single team at this tournament, including the 2 that played here today. But today we finally get to go over the actual series that we got last night to kick off Worlds in 2025. So I'm excited. I hope you guys are as well. Let's get into it. If you are new here, or maybe new to how we cover Worlds, what we're going to do is go game by game in this series, talking about the advantages and disadvantages that each team was able to generate. I'll be giving a player of the game and a dead of the game for each individual game that we cover. And at the end of the series, I will be giving a player of the series to tie everything into a nice, neat little bow. We have the entirety of Swiss starting up today, or I guess tonight, as this is going live, and that's so exciting, but we'll get to preview basically every single one of the, 0-0 matchups in the Swiss stage. I'll talk about who I think are favorites at the end of this, who I think maybe got really unlucky in terms of their draw, or maybe just got a draw that they didn't want to get. There are certain teams that I think got more lucky than others, and we've certainly gotten some good matchups, we'll just say, in terms of the first, round of Swiss stage, but that will be saved for the end of the video. Most of today will be spent on this play-in series, so let's go ahead and get talking about it, shall we? This was really a big one because, again, it's win and you're in, it's lose and go home. It really is just one and done for both of these teams in terms of whether or not they're going to be able to qualify. There is a pretty big favorite coming into the series, but it's the number 4 seeds from the 2 big regions in the world, the number 4 seed from the LPL in Invictus Gaming and the number 4 seed from the LCK in T1. There is a clear favorite in terms of perception heading into this, and even in terms of results over the course of this year. I think T1 are definitely looked at as the team to beat in this series, and you know what? I completely agree. I put T1 number 2 in my power rankings coming into this tournament. I think they are a potential favorite to win the entire thing, and I had Invictus all the way down at 11, and I kind of talked a bit in that series, or in that video, about why I think this series might not necessarily be very Invictus favored. I think that their matchup individually in terms of these players isn't all that good, but what do I mean by that? Well, let's go ahead and kind of dive into what I'm expecting from both teams. First off, for T1, the only reason that they're even coming into the play-in stage here is because Gen.G decided to throw a series against KT Rolster in order to make sure T1 was in as bad of a position as possible. Of course, I'm trolling everybody online who's saying, oh, Gen.G did this to, screw over T1 and to get him into the play-in stage. Completely forget that T1 and HLE happened after Gen.G and KT. Gen.G lost before T1 even knew that they were going to be in the lower bracket, so that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me unless they just presumed that T1, the team that beat Hanwha Life all of the time in the regular season, were just going to lose to HLE again in the playoffs. Maybe they predicted that and their profits, and you can say that you blame them for going down to the lower bracket, but at the end of the day, Gen.G just messed up in one series, figured things out, won the league, and T1 were the ones to pay the price for that mistake. But they couldn't beat Hanwha Life. They were not a team that ended up getting into winners finals, and that's kind of the reason that they are here. This has been a top 2 team in the world throughout basically all of 2025. I still think that's very much in them. I think players like Owner and Gumayushi and Keria are playing out of their mind right now. I've seen from a lot of other lists that my opinions on T1 I think are definitely a bit different in terms of how and why this team is winning. I do give a lot of credit to Owner, but I think over the summer split, it's been more clear to me that the bot lane, I think, has been the primary focal point for what T1 want to do. Owner has still been excellent, and he was the primary option and really the guy for T1 throughout all of the beginning of the year when the bot lane wasn't playing too well, when, Doran and Faker, I think, were much more late game focused and were consistently getting caught out in the mid game. Owner was the one stepping up and really generating gold leads for this team, keeping them in a spot where they could go out and win a lot of their team fights because they are a very very good 5v5 team, but I think a lot of that responsibility has kind of diminished over the course of the past couple months. I'll just say, I think in summer, Owner had a few more games that were not quite as good than maybe people are giving him credit for. I see a lot of people just kind of talking about him as if he's, constantly dominated Canyon or been way better than Canyon. I think there are multiple series in the regular season, 2 of their 3 series in the regular season, as well as, most of their series in the playoffs would very much disagree with that argument. I think Owner in particular was terrible in the regular season against Gen G, but Guma and Keria, I think, have really stepped up and been kind of the guys for T1. I put Keria at number 3 on my list. It's clear that I'm kind of alone on that, and especially in thinking that he's the best player on T1 right now, but this guy has done everything for this team. I considered him for MVP over the course of the LCK year. I really don't know what people are low on when it comes to his performances. I think he is getting into form at the right time, and it's not like, oh, can Keria sustain this? We know he can. We know he can be the best support in the world. It was really just about seeing it consistently, and we've seen that. Gumayushi is just the most consistent AD carry you could possibly ask for. He's really gotten back into form ever since the start of the summer split, and I'm really excited to see him back in like a world-class situation. He was carrying this team last year going into the World Championships, coming out of the summer split playoffs, and I think he did so again. The question is, can Doran and Faker step up? And honestly, the easy answer to that is going to be likely, because when you look at Invictus on the other side, where are their strengths? Well, their biggest strength, in my opinion, is their carry duo here, Rookie and Gala, who I think have both been at times elite throughout this year, but very inconsistent in that regard, and I think they both swapped off timings. I think Rookie was very good for basically all of the summer split regular season. You're looking at a player who I think really was able to elevate and be an all-pro caliber guy in a weak mid lane class, I'll, admit, but he was probably the second best mid laner in the LPL in the regular season, and then wasn't as good in the playoffs, as he's kind of been known to do in the LPL playoffs over the past couple of years. There's a reason this guy has not been able to make a world championship in quite a long time. It's because he's really been, I don't want to say a bit of a choker, but it's certainly not been a consistent run for Rookie over the past couple of years. And then Gala was the one to start getting a lot of attention in the playoffs, but people forgot that Gala wasn't very good for like large sections of this year, especially at the beginning of the regular season in summer, where he was running games down, especially against teams like Top Esports and Jackie Love. I was always, and I still am, stunned that people are putting Gala above Jackie Love. That to me just signals that nobody watched those two play against each other literally any of the times they played against each other all year long, which isn't surprising, but it's certainly frustrating that so many people are making lists not having watched those games. But Gala can be really good, especially against talent that he's better than. When he goes up against talent that's better than him, sometimes he likes to fade into the background a bit more, and that's my worry for a series like this. Is I just named 2 players that are the key pieces to why Invictus was winning over the course of most of this year. You have Faker on the other side of Rookie. I don't necessarily think, Rookie's woes in big moments are going to match Faker's successes in big moments in a series like this, and I just think Gumayushi is a better version of Gala right now. I've always compared these 2 players in terms of playstyle, but Guma is certainly in better form. I think Keria has been better than Mako. The Shy was excellent in the regular season and then completely ran it down in the playoffs, and I think Doran, as a stabilizing late game team fighter, is going to be able to take advantage of that, and I'm just not a fan of Wei. Owner is the top 10 player in the world, and Wei is just nowhere near that kind of conversation. So for me, this matchup is very T1 favored. My prediction would honestly be T1 3-0. I just don't really see a world where IG end up having the firepower to keep up with T1, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe IG actually are better than what I'm expecting. The only way to know is to go game by game, and that means starting with game number 1. So let's get into it. The winner of game number 1 was T1. They are going to take game number 1. They're going to go up in this series 1-0, and they're going to do so in very fun fashion. This was not a dominant game by any stretch. I know it was sub 35 minutes, but this is a classic T1 victory where they're losing for a majority of this game. Invictus have like a 2.5k gold lead at 29, 30-ish minutes into the game, and then all of a sudden one fight goes awry for IG. The Shy goes a little bit too deep, and then Rookie ends up getting caught out trying to do as much damage as possible, and the entire lead that IG had spent the entire game building up on is completely evaporated. T1 is able to take control, they take the Baron, and they just push to end the game. It really is that simple sometimes. If you can win the most important fight in the game, it does not matter that you've lost basically every other fight throughout the entire rest of this game. So credit to T1, again, a very vintage T1 victory, but this has got to be pretty demoralizing for a team like Invictus that, were underdogs going into the series, had a massive lead in game number 1 because they got side selection from the coin flip, and then all of a sudden, it just doesn't end up working out. out. Let's go ahead and talk about the game in particular. Player of the game for me in game 1 is going to go to Gumayusi, although I think it's kind of up for debate. I think Owner and Faker both have decent arguments. Faker was certainly the one to pop off in the final team fight, you know, in the base siege, I'll say. I think he picked up a triple kill in that and, you know, ended up going from 1-1-4 to like 4-1-5, and all of a sudden the KDA looks a lot better. But I think Faker was also kind of irrelevant for a majority of the game. He even got killed on the top side with a really nice flash from Rookie, you know, getting caught out in a side lane. That's happened to Faker a lot over the course of this year, which you might not necessarily expect from a player like Faker if you're not tuning into the LCK, but you know, his positioning has not necessarily been good, especially domestically over the past couple of years, and you know, we saw that here, but he did step up in the final team fight, so I guess you could consider him. Owner was the one that I think was the most active on the map, and certainly that's kind of the role of Trundle, but I just don't know if he necessarily took over the game in the same way that Guma did. He's going to go a bit under the radar for this performance, but this guy's positioning was phenomenal. He was constantly pumping out damage, and he was never really in danger. That spell shield was really clutch going up against Kiana, who can very easily just kind of take down Sivir with, you know, a lot of the ranged AoE damage that she's able to put out, especially with that ultimate. You have a lot of easy ways to engage onto the Sivir without really needing to be, you know, super aggressive onto Sivir herself. But for Guma, again, that spell shield and then the positioning throughout the rest of the team fight just kept him really safe, and I think the damage numbers at the end really showed that he was able to free fire for a majority of this game. I've just been really impressed with Gumayusi. I think he deserves a lot more credit for how well he's played. Like, Owner is getting a lot of credit, and I did put Owner higher in my top 20. I had Guma at 11, I had Owner at 8, but I had Carry at 3, and I think this bot lane in general has been the most important part of this team, and I think that showcased itself in the team fights. But again, if you wanted to give player of the game to Owner, I do kind of understand. I just think he got out jungled in the early game by Wei. He did a good job of taking advantage of the Shy. We'll say that when he started running it down, and you know, obviously we'll see more of that when we talk about the Shy on the other side of this matchup, but I think that had more to do with the fact that the Shy was running it on the top side rather than Owner being like the best jungler in the universe. Faker was solid at the end of the game. Doran was not so good. He got solo killed by the Shy early on. He was able to pump out a lot of damage in these team fights, but honestly, I don't think the Ambessa was game breaking. I think a lot of that damage ended up being a bit more superfluous in lane damage rather than, you know, actual effective damage at the end of the game. And then Keria was fine, I think, as the Alistar. A couple of really nice moments, him surviving on like, you know, 50 HP on a top lane play that they end up making ends up being really big because they do just pull back some gold basically for free on that play because of Keria being able to survive. And then, you know, the rest of the Alistar engages were fine enough, but I just don't think he was like unbelievable. This was a team effort from T1. If you want to give a team player of the game, I think that that's even more accurate than one player kind of standing out. And then for Invictus on the other side, it is the easiest dud of the game you could possibly give. The fact that they lost this game is almost entirely on the Shy in the top lane. There's really no one else to sit here and blame. Like, he completely sold this game. And I'm not going to say that everybody else played perfect. Mako's engages and his ultimates this game were just not very good. That's kind of indicative of what we've seen domestically. He was nowhere near my top 20 list. And as somebody who came in the top 5 last year, I think he was 4th on that list last year going into Worlds. He was nowhere near it this year. But the Shy absolutely was the biggest problem. He gets that solo kill on the top side onto Doran, immediately trades 1-for-1 because Gumayusi is making his way up there. And from that point on in the game, all the Shy did was get either 3 or 4 man dove and die, or dive in onto the backline, completely separate himself from the team and die first in a team fight to completely throw the game away for Invictus. This was a miserable performance from the Shy, and I think specifically that one under mid lane tower, mid lane tier 1, that basically threw the entire game away. That's entirely his fault. There's no one else to blame there but him. This is not the kind of performance that he can be giving. This is a player who has, at times, played his best League of Legends at Worlds in 2018 and 2023. The 2 years he's been able to make the World Finals, we were talking about the Shy as somebody we were frustrated by because he always showed up at Worlds. He had that T1 syndrome in him where it didn't really matter how bad the regular season looked. He was always going to be able to figure it out in the big moments. Well, right now, he was bad in the playoffs domestically, and he was really bad in game number 1. He has to turn things around because I think the rest of the team played well. Wei, I thought, had a really good game on the Kiana, certainly a better game than he normally has on a champion like this. Rookie was really good on the Rise. He got caught once, but outside of that was solid enough. Gala, you know, was along for the ride on the Corki. Mako wasn't exactly giving him the best to work with, but this was a mid-jungle, you know, masterclass, I'll say, throughout a lot of this for IG. They were in a really good spot to be able to take this game off of Wei and Rookie being the strong points of the map, and the Shy just couldn't really let that happen. So IG now down 0-1 in this series. They need to bounce back in game 2. Going down 0-2 against against T1 is a death sentence at a tournament like this. You need to tie up the series. And for T1, if you can get that gigantic lead, all of a sudden, even the worry that maybe you aren't going to be able to win this as the favorites in this series kind of, moves itself closer to the back of your mind rather than the front. But we know that both of these teams and both of these, organizations are primed to step up. Is IG going to be able to equalize this series at one apiece, or is T1 going to take that dominant lead? Well, the winner of game number 2 was Invictus Gaming. They are going to take game number 2. They're going to tie up the series here at 1 apiece, and we've got ourselves a very interesting series on our hands between these two teams because this was a pretty good win. IG tried to throw it down the stretch, a couple of big mistakes coming in from them. Really just one big mistake that threw their entire gold lead in a very similar vein to what happened in game number 1, but this time T1 was there to throw it right back to them. There were a couple of really bad games on the other side of this, really only Faker and I guess at times Gumiyushi playing okay in this game. Faker was genuinely good, but everybody else made some pretty critical errors for T1 that really ended up in them, not being in a position to capitalize when IG made errors of their own throughout this game. But, again, IG being the better team in this one, being up about the 2.5, 3, 4K gold, I would say around 20-ish minutes into the game, and then throwing it all away and then gaining it back and then winning by around 7K, all of this stuff, like the IG experience that I think LPL fans are so familiar with. I think there are some concerning traits that I'll touch upon for the LPL, but I think the big takeaway for game 2 for me is that genuinely through the first 2 games, IG is the better team. Like, I don't think that's really all that disputable. They should have won game number 1. They had a huge gold lead that they completely threw away in one terrible fight, and they had a huge gold lead in the early game again here in game number 2, and then tried to throw it away but got it back. Like, this is a team that's just been better at being able to generate resources this series than T1 has been on the other side of this matchup. So big ups to Invictus. I think they have played really, really well. And in this game, it was really all around Rookie in terms of the way he was creating. He's going to get player of the game. The shockwaves were obviously huge, but just the raw damage coming out over a consistent amount in team fights was very, very strong. I think Orianna is a ridiculously good pick right now. I understand that Jarvan is kind of like the complement. It's why T1 felt so pressured to take it away on R1 once the Ori was left up for B1. But honestly, you are absolutely winning that trade if you are the Orianna player. To me, this is the 1A mid laner coming into this tournament. We already saw that a bit at ASI, but I really do think she fits into every single comp and every single kind of play style, and you can really do anything you want with her. She's okay in lane. She's a great late game facilitator, and she's a really good late game team fighter. Like, she just kind of does everything at a pretty good level, and I think that that is just one of the best possible things you can have in the current meta because team comps need to be more fluid. I think the structured, rigid team comps where the combinations, the wombo combos that everybody's been pulling out, like, they're kind of solved at this point, and I think it's really easy to try and punish a lot of those duos, and it really does lock you into a playstyle. Wanting something like Orianna means that, oh, now we can do whatever we want for the rest of this draft as long as we have some sort of engage. Orianna is obviously going to pair with that very, very well. But the way that IG ended up drafting around it, you've got the engage here with the Wukong coming in as your B2, your jungle pick, but this bot lane as well really benefits from an Orianna because if you do get to that 4-item, game power spike for Caitlyn, like towards the end of the game where she finally can start getting back online, now all of a sudden Caitlyn can be a primary carry and Orianna can actually shift more into that secondary carry mindset because she has the shields, and then you pair those Ori shields with Karma shields, and now your Scion on the top side is unkillable throughout this game because there was also a Mountain Dragon or a Mountain Soul throughout this game that they were able to get 2 of. So pretty smart combination, I would say, for Invictus, and it just kind of showcases the flexibility that Orianna offers, and Rookie obviously piloted it well. You have to play the champion well in order to make it work. I just think Ori is so good, and I think Rookie definitely made the most of that. But the big takeaway for me is Wei is gapping Owner. I think that really is kind of just the conclusion through the first 2 games. Owner was okay at times on the Trundle, but I shied away from giving him player of the game because I think there were many fights in the early game that he needed to play better. In this one, we're going to talk about Owner a bit later. Wei is just better than him in terms of being able to play the early map right now and generate resources for his team. Again, I'm not going to go too hard into Owner because I think he'll be fine, and I'll kind of talk about why on the other side. But Wei is impressing me. I did not think that he was going to do this well in this series. This was the big reason I thought this was a terrible matchup for IG, is because I thought Wei was going to get taken advantage of. But at the end of the day, sometimes you step up when it matters the most, and Wei is playing the best he's played in a very long time. The Shy certainly stabilized. He was pretty much unkillable on the Scion. Gala and Mako I thought played really well. Mako was caught a couple of times, but Gala I thought was great on the Caitlyn. I don't think he's getting enough credit for this performance. Overall, IG was definitely the better team here in game 2, just as they kind of were for most of game number 1. I thought this was going to be a blowout, and here IG are coming out of game 2 feeling very confident. And for T1 on the other side, as much as I can sit here and say IG are feeling confident, I'm not worried for T1. Yes, they lose game number 2 here, but this was a winnable game because once again, IG have shown that they cannot, do anything other than throw a lead in the early game. And I think the big breakdown for me when it comes to that is that's clearly been a problem for the LPL, just in general, is that they're okay and are actually pretty solid at generating early leads. They just have no idea what to do with them. These LPL games are such fiestas that their late games have become very bad. I don't know what's going on in scrims, but this was the case at ASI. This was the case domestically for the LPL as well. None of the teams at this tournament know how to play the late game, and I think the LCK is going to be able to capitalize. This was yet another game that T1 could have won. They just made too many mistakes, and I think there are 3 players to point out that made some pretty backbreaking errors. Dud of the game for me is going to go to Owner. He's been completely outplayed through the first 2 games. I don't think there's any sort of justification you can give through the first 2 games. He had a couple of good team fights on the Trundle in the back half of game 1. This was a terrible Jarvan game, and some people might look at Doran making really the worst play of the game by diving, I believe it was Gala, under that tier 1 tower in the top lane instead of just taking the tower and basically losing T1's entire gold lead, giving over Baron and losing the game. Like, yes, Doran made a terrible play there, but Owner, I think, made consistent bad plays over and over again. At least Doran had gold and played well up until that point in the game. Owner was just a nightmare throughout all of this. He's just not playing well. And the reason I feel comfortable saying that, the reason that I honestly am not worried about Owner, and this is going to piss a lot of people off who continue to dislike my top 20 players at Worlds list, this is what Owner did for a large portion of the summer split. It's not like these games that Owner is having right now are foreign to me, that they haven't happened so far this year. They absolutely are something that I'm familiar with in terms of how Owner has played, especially against top tier teams over the course of this year, and he's been able to right the ship. I'm not saying that this is just who he is, but pretending like he hasn't had bad games and putting him top 3 or top 4 in your top 20 players in the world list, like, that's just ridiculous to me. Like, I think Owner it has to be acknowledged that Owner was not as good in summer as he was in spring, and this is the version that I think was closer to that kind of performance. Hopefully he can get back on track. I have a feeling he will, because he did get back on track when he needed to, but he'll have games like this every once in a while, and I think he is kind of showcasing it. I hope that this is like proof that I know what I'm talking about in that top 20 video when I mentioned this. Like, everybody told me that I'm crazy, but here it is, like, live at Worlds. This is exactly what's been happening in the LCK. I do think Doran, like I said, deserves a lot of criticism because he made kind of the game-losing play on the top side with that Cassante. Really had no business diving that top lane tier 1 and ended up really throwing the game away. He was really strong outside of that, though, so I didn't want to give him dead of the game. A couple of other problems as well. Like, it wasn't the only throw he had, but at least he had gold in this game. Keria also, I think, made a ton of mistakes on the Recon. A couple of really nice knockups, but he overextended multiple times in this game and got caught out. Again, Faker was the saving grace on Akali, but there's only so much you can do on that champion, even with Gala's funny little history with that. So for T1 now, you are looking at a situation where you've looked worse through the first 2 games, and you were big favorites coming into the series. The positive is that now you have side select for the first time throughout this series, which is definitely a positive. And for Invictus, as much as you've taken this big 1-1 series tie, like, that's best case scenario for you in this, is that you're 1-1 and you tried to throw away game 2. Like, neither of these teams, I think, have really shown their best over the course of the first 2 games. Hopefully somebody can lock in game number 3 and really showcase some high-level gameplay, because it's the most important game of the series. If you know me and you know my thoughts on that best of 5, you have to win game number 3, but only one team can do it. Who will it be? Well, the winner of game number 3 was T1. They are going to take game number 3. They are going to go back up in this series 2-1, and they finally have a game where they can just say, hey, we were better here today. Obviously game 1 was great from them because they were able to pull out that final team fight and close out the game. Game 2, they had a chance to come back, but they were worse in the early game and worse in the late game. It's not really a great look. Finally, a game where T1 generates pressure in the early game, make a lot of proactive plays on their own, get a big lead for their jungler, and just play off of that. This was a really good game from T1. IG tried to fight back through the power of Rookie getting a ton of gold in the early game on the Hui, and then Gala eventually hitting that power spike on the Smolder that made him so dangerous, but the ancillary pieces of this IG team just did not play well in game number 3. It was You know, I think time maybe for the clock to strike midnight for Wei. In a series like this, he was always the outlier, I think, in terms of what we expected out of this series, and that very much came to fruition, in my opinion, in game number 3. But before we jump into Invictus Gaming, we, of course, talk about the winners in T1. Player of the game for me is going to go to Owner, although I think Gumayusi made a great case for it in this game. It really is those two. Like, Doran, I think, had a good game. Keria had some really big moments, some nice ultimates. Faker was there as well. I'm not saying he was the problem. He had a lot of really good plays. It's just, you know, he's playing Annie. It's hard to pop off in the same kind of way that these other champions are going to be able to like steal the spotlight. But Owner was definitely the main character for T1 in this series. It was very funny to watch them draft a Galio and a Renata and an Annie, and you're like, oh, they're going to play for Yunara. They're going to try to play for these front-to-back team fights. No, they're playing Protect the Xin Zhao in terms of how this comp ends up going. Owner gets a ton of kills in the early game, and therefore they just go, whatever we need to do to get this guy to dive in onto the backline and kill somebody, like, we are going to do that. We're going to pump every bit of resource we have into making sure that Owner is as strong as possible. This is why I wasn't really worried. Owner is better than Wei, and Owner has bad games, which again, people ignore, and it's part of his evaluation as a player. You have to acknowledge the fact that he's not going to play well every single game, but he almost always is able to find a way to bounce back and play well after that, and I think that that's what you got here in this series, and this was a really important game for him to step up. This is the biggest game of the series. For him to play the best game that he's played all series long so far here in Game 3, I think is a really, really important sign for T1. But again, I want to continue to shout out Gumayusi. Honestly, this guy's ridiculous. At this point, I hate calling any T1 player underrated because their fan base is so loud and ferocious that, you know, it's basically impossible for anybody on T1 to be underrated in terms of the way that they are perceived. But I think at this point, we might be saying that Gumayusi is underrated. This guy is a true contender for best AD carry in the world. Like, he very much is somebody that can perform in basically any scenario. I think he's made a strong case over the course of the past couple months to be considered the best player on this team, you know, alongside Keria and Owner, but Guma's been better so far in this series. He's certainly been better than Gala, who I saw some people ranking above Guma in their top 20 lists. Like, no way, man. This guy is a borderline top 5-ish player in the world. I know I put him at number 11, but again, number 11 to like number 7 or number 6, like, they're all very similar grades for me. This guy is an A-, borderline A like caliber player globally right now, and I just don't know if he's getting talked about in that regard. Gumayusi is ridiculously good, and he's in great form. Keria I thought was good, but Doran was really the third piece in this game that I think really opened things up for T1. Those Galio ultimates were really important. They've played this Xin Zhao Galio combo a lot, but most of the time, obviously, it's Faker on Galio. You're not necessarily using your Fearless Galio on Doran all that commonly, but of course, as a mega counter to Rumble on the top side, and then, you know, obviously for the team fights, for the ultimate, for just the overall effect, Galio is still really effective. And Doran, I thought, had a great game. Easily his best of the series. You know, Faker was there as well. Did the Faker thing that he always does, which is play so greedy in terms of his positioning, like step up to places he has absolutely no business stepping up to because it baits the rest of the team into taking a team fight that they already know they can win 4v5. Like, no offense to Faker. Like, I think it's a good play if you're like, whatever, man, we win a team fight no matter what. We might as well step up and be, you know, super greedy with our positioning. But all of this, like, oh, why do teams keep diving onto Faker? It's because the guy is 6,000 yards away from the rest of his team clearing a control ward by himself on Annie. Like, of course you have to dive in on that. It's just unfortunate that T1 can basically win every fight without him at this point. So, you know, credit to them. They got so much gold in the early game on the Xin Zhao and Yunara that it became really hard to play. And then for IG on the other side, obviously there are some positives to talk about. I think Rookie had a decent game. He got caught out a couple of times being too far forward. It's going to happen when the game is kind of, you know, spiraling out of control. But Rookie has generally been very good across this series so far. I've been very impressed considering I wasn't necessarily expecting him to show up in the big moments. I think Gala was fine here. Came off of a really good game number 2 with a nice game number 3 on the Smolder. You know, played it slow and steady in the early game. Ended up getting to the point where he could actually be a really big threat in team fights and just didn't really have the team support around him. But all 3 of the other members of this team, I thought, were really disappointing. Mako had a really terrible game on the Leona. I thought he ended up piloting that champion very poorly. A couple of nice ultimates, but really just dove in way too aggressively. And then dud of the series, or dud of the game, I should say, is really between the Shy or Wei on the top side. The Shy has a strong argument on the Rumble because he was terrible and constantly was getting killed in side lanes and doing no damage in team fights. But at the very least, like, the Rumble was dropping ultimate. I think that flash around 11 or 12 minutes in that fight was really bad for IG and for Rumble, but you know, it is what it is. Like, at least he traded a kill there. It was 1-for-1. Like, at least he got some gold back. Wei was nightmarishly bad in this game. Constantly out of position, bad ultimates, bad engages, bad lockdown. Just not a good game from Wei. Again, I said it earlier, but the clock kind of struck midnight on Wei's, you know, fantastic series. We expected him to be the weak link, not only of IG, but across all 10 of the players in this series. And unfortunately, in Game 3, the most important game, that finally became the case after some two really strong performances. But it's not over for IG. Their backs are up against the wall, but if they can win game number 4 and force a game 5, anything can happen in a game number 5, but it is do or die. The end of their year could be, you know, right on the horizon in the first series of Worlds. But for T1, they are one game away from potentially punching their ticket to the Swiss stage and joining the teams that I think they expected to be alongside all year long. Are they going to be able to close it out, or will IG survive for one more game? Well, the winner of game number 4 was T1. They are going to take game number 4. They are going to take this series 3-1 and officially become the 16th team to qualify for the Swiss stage of the 2025 World Championships. Unfortunately for Invictus Gaming, this loss in game number 4 means that their tournament is over basically as it's begun. It's a really frustrating play-in stage for them. I think that obviously if this were KT Rolster, or if this were, you know, a group of teams around the 4 seed from all the other regions, perhaps things would be a bit different. At least they'd get some games to show off, but no, they go into T1 here in the play-in stage and they are immediately eliminated from the tournament. It's got to be frustrating, but at the end of the day, it's not particularly surprising. I think this team was happy to even get to Worlds in the first place with how they played for parts of this year, and, you know, the ups and downs kind of just became normal for IG. We'll talk about their year in totality at the end of this segment, but starting with T1 here, it's just a really nice game from them. They once again lost in the early game because that's just what this team does. They're not a very good early game team, and IG is a very good early game team, and the LPL in general are very good early game teams. And unfortunately for IG and for LPL fans, it just does never seem like it's going to be hang-onable for them. They're never going to be able to hang on to these big leads that they're able to generate because their mid and late games are just so much worse than everybody coming out of the LCK, and that's become more and more clear. There were two big standouts here in Game 4 in particular, but player of the game and player of the series for me is going to go to Gumayushi in the bot lane. I'm going to be honest, like, Owner got player of the game in game 4 on broadcast, and he got player of the series. I'm not going to sit here and say that that's entirely wrong. He was very good in game number 4 here, played really aggressive because he understood he had a Lulu alongside him that could basically keep him alive for eternity. Like, he was never going to die when he dived into these fights, but I certainly think Owner got too much credit for either this game 4 or especially the first part of this series. There was an easy choice for player of the series for me, and that is Gumayushi. I don't really think there is an argument in my mind that he was the best player on the Rift here today, because I think you'd have to ignore the first half of the series to give it to Owner, and I'm not comfortable doing that. I think that that's not something that I'd be, you know, that I'd feel good about. So Guma, to me, is more than deserving of this. I thought he was really the big win condition in game 1 when he was front to backing on the Sivir. He was excellent on the Yunara, flashing forward and doing a ton of damage in team fights in game 3 on the Yunara, and then, of course, this Ashe game in game 4 where he was Hawkeye, as got called out by Kobe on broadcast on the Ashe. Like, just a phenomenal series, and I quickly think that Guma is becoming the most underrated player in the world. This guy is just elite at absolutely every part of the game at this point. He's a great team fighter. He's a great laner. He's a really good mid-game player. He's the best objective smiter in the world, regardless of position, as we already know. We saw that on the Yunara in game 3. Like, this guy just does everything at such an elite level. He's really fun to watch, and he mega gapped Gala on the other side. I got some criticism for not putting Gala on my top 20 list. I think this series kind of showcased that maybe I was right for that. Obviously, very small sample size. I'm not going to sit here and say that this proved everything, but Guma was excellent. He absolutely has earned all the recognition that he's gotten, and honestly, we might not even be giving him enough at this point in his career. I think the other player that I considered for player of the game was not even Owner, it was Keria, because all of Owner's massive plays, not to say all of them, but like a lot of Owner's massive plays work because Keria can just keep him alive forever in those fights, and the Nocturne can dive in and play so aggressive, and you can have Atlas freaking out because Owner never dies, and that's the benefit of having Lulu. I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times on this channel. This champion is broken as long as you have the requirements that you need to draft her. You don't even really need a hyper carry ADC, you just need someone who can do damage in the later part of the game to be able to buff, especially through the laning phase. And then you need engage, hard engage coming out from other parts of the team. You have that here with the Ornhorn, and more specifically Nocturne ultimate alongside potential LeBlanc flank. You have Ashe Arrow. You have plenty other ways to start a fight, so you're not missing out on those engage supports all that much. And you need somebody who can frontline consistently, and you have that in the Ornn as well on the top side of the map. If those conditions are met, then Lulu is the most broken champion you can possibly draft in the entire game. I really think she just breaks the game wide open. It's really hard to break through where Lulu is at right now in terms of her, shielding and healing power. I think this champion is just incredibly overtuned, and I think Keria ended up proving that here in game number 4. Oner did play well. Again, I'm not trying to take everything away from Oner. He was excellent in game 3, and I think he was definitely, better in game number 4 here than he was, but, player of the series just seems a bit rich for me with how the start of this went. Faker, I thought, played really well throughout this series and throughout this game. The laning phase wasn't the cleanest in the world, but he ended up making it work, and Doran was solid enough as that weak side tank top laner that you kind of need him to be. T1 was just kind of better here today. We expected them to be better, and they were better in the ways that we thought they would be, which is late game team fighting, not necessarily early games where they were down. I think in all 4 games at 15 minutes, they might have been down like 2k plus gold all 4 games, which is ridiculous, but at the end of the day, T1 fought better, and that means that they were able to take this series. And then for Invictus on the other side, what is this game 4 draft? Like, your season's on the line and Varus top is what you go towards. I get it. It's the Shy, and this is kind of his thing. He pulls out the crazy picks. You have a player like Mirwin at this tournament who's kind of built in that mold, but this isn't it, man. Like, the Shy did not even look all that good on the Varus in terms of how he played the team fights. He's stud of the game for me because I think the pick is a travesty, and I think the way he played it was even worse. Like, if you're going to pick Varus top, if you're going to try and punish this Ornn in laning phase and then try to scale with this double marksman, or I guess single marksman comp with the Varus and then the Ziggs bot lane into the late game, you need this Varus to be good, and unfortunately, the Shy just was not good. Constantly picked out early in fights, and it's not even a side lane problem. He just wasn't doing damage in team fights, and that's the biggest sin that I think he committed here. He wasn't the only player on the team to play poor. I thought Mako had a very bad game here in game 4. Gala, I thought, played pretty terrible on the Ziggs here in game number 4. I think people might question the Ziggs pick in general, but first off, T1 has had a terrible time adjusting to Ziggs over the course of this year. It's been kind of a kryptonite for them, and even more so on top of that, Gala is probably the best Ziggs player in the world, certainly one of the candidates for the best Ziggs player in the world. He has been for many years now since that champion's really become a bot laner, so I don't necessarily hate the idea of putting Gala on Ziggs and giving, Rookie and the Shy more opportunities as the solo laners. That's what worked for this team in the regular season, but unfortunately for them, the Shy did not show up today, and Gala had a bad game on Ziggs. His positioning was really terrible in this game, and that's really been a big problem for Gala in these late game fights, is that he's just too far forward, and he got caught there once again. Wei was aggressive. I think some of the plays he went for were fine. I don't think he was the biggest problem here. Neither was Rookie, even if, again, Rookie was also almost entirely disconnected from his own team in basically every fight. But at the end of the day, IG just were not good enough to win a lot of these late game skirmishes. They made bad mental errors, and they team fought poorly, and that's not good enough to be able to take a series against T1. It's unfortunate that they only get one series at Worlds after spending so much time and working so hard to qualify for this tournament in the first place, but it's just how the cookie crumbles. It's how the tournament ends up going. I think overall this year has to be considered a success for Invictus, considering just where they were and even where these players were. Players like Rookie have really been struggling to get back to the World Championships. Wei started the year on BLG, got benched, and then came over here to Invictus and somehow still made the World Championships. Gala, Mako, even the Shy, they were all incredibly successful the last time we saw them. Mako on Top Esports last year, Gala on LNG making Worlds last year, and of course the Shy, last time he played was on Weibo Gaming when he made World Finals. So, it was an expectation for them to be able to at the very least get back to Worlds, and I know a lot of people were thinking that at the beginning of the year, but this was an organization in Invictus Gaming that had been at the bottom of the LPL for many years now, and they finally decided to go back all in once Rookie and the Shy kind of, determined that they want to go back to the organization. They want to invest in these high-name players to get to a spot like this, and they get to Worlds, they just can't really do anything with it. So I think it's an okay year, maybe not the one that they had hoped for Invictus to be those world title contenders, but certainly a year that, getting back to the World Championships for an org that has not been here in a long time, it's certainly a plus. And then for T1, it's expected that they made the Swiss stage. If they had lost here, things would have gotten very, very interesting, considering I put them number 2 in my power rankings, but the play-ins are not the concern for T1. Like, honestly, even the Swiss stage is not a concern for T1. This is a team that expects nothing less than to win the World Championships, to, go back to back to back to get that three-peat going for the first time in this organization's history. They have the opportunity to do so, and honestly, with the players playing the way they are right now, with Gumayushi, Keria, Oner, especially in the form that they're in, Faker's gonna step up. Doran can be the hero in these late-game team fights. Like, with these players playing the way they are right now, they really are a potential favorite to win the entire thing. All right, but that is going to do it for my Worlds 2025 Play-In Series overview and analysis video. We now know our official 16 teams that have qualified for the Swiss stage of the World Championships, and we even know the day one draw, the 0-0 draw that I am so excited about. We're going to go over and preview every single one of these matchups. I wish that the format was a bit better. It is a best of one, so theoretically anyone can take a game here, going 1-0 throughout this first round, but there certainly are going to be matchups where one team is favored over the other, and some teams certainly got better draws than others. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Our first matchup, as you can see on the screen, is Gen G taking on PSG Talon. If you followed the channel and you know the power rankings, and really if you have eyes, you know Gen G should not really have any problems here. PSG are even worse than you might think on the surface because of their player names. You've got Karsa and Maple and Betty, and players that have found success. Even Aja and Woody have been to multiple international tournaments. They're not who you think they are in terms of this team. This is not a particularly good team at this tournament, and Gen G really should have no problems dispatching them pretty easily in a 1-0 with their clean macro. Then you get to, in my opinion, one of the most interesting of the first day matchups, I guess it's fair to say. I think there are three matchups that I really want to highlight here as the ones that I find the most fun to talk about, and this is certainly one of them, FlyQuest taking on T1. This is an unfortunate draw for FlyQuest. Basically, whoever drew T1 was going to be unlucky throughout this stage. I mean, even Top Esports, right? Like, that would have been a bad draw, but T1 is, like, particularly bad to draw if you are a Pool 1 team, whether it have been FlyQuest, G2, or hell, like, imagine if Billy drew T1 in that first round. It would have just been kind of an insane way to start the tournament, but I think Fly is unfortunately getting sacrificed as the Pool 1 team here to T1. I still think FlyQuest is a top 8 team at this tournament. I think they will get out of the Swiss stage, or at least they should get out of the Swiss stage, but they're going to have to do it going 0-1 on day 1 because I think T1 has this in the bag. G2 taking on Top Esports is next. A lot of people are talking about this as like one of the interesting games. To me, if Top Esports don't win this, that is a major upset. I just don't really see G2 being anywhere near this kind of matchup. Now, the one thing you can say in their favor is that if there was ever an Eastern team to draw for G2 in this 0-0 matchup, it might be Top, only because, first of all, this organization has their own little mental battle and histories with, not performing well. They usually get out of groups in Swiss, though. That's something they've done very consistently, with the exception of 2022, which they didn't because of a bug, so I'm not even really blaming them for, but also because you're going Caps into Cream. Like, if there was ever a matchup where Caps could actually be the better mid laner against an Eastern, a top 2 league type of mid laner, it's this one, where Cream is definitely weaker than Caps. So I think for G2, you look okay in this matchup. I just think Top Esports are better. I think Kanavi and Discumond is just so in favor of Top Esports and Kanavi that I have a hard time believing G2 are going to be fine here. Jackie Love and Hansama, like, this is a matchup that I think Top Esports, if they lose this, it would be a huge upset. And then an interesting one, not one of the interesting ones, but, a fun one, CFO, the Flying Oysters taking on Fnatic. This should be a win early for the Flying Oysters. Excited for them. Fnatic is not one of the better teams at this tournament. I know people are kind of used to the LCP being a little bit less performative at this region, or at this tournament, but this region has shown across this year, and specifically the Oysters have shown across this year, they are just as good as any major region team. They came in top 8 in my power rankings as well. I think they will go to 1-0. You've got Billy Gaming taking on 100 Thieves. 100 Thieves are going to get clobbered in this one. Lucky for BLG to draw this one early. I think there was a circumstance where they drew T1 as that Pool 3 seed, and all of a sudden the number 1 seed from the LPL loses and goes down 0-1. I think that actually would have been pretty likely because I don't think BLG is like a dominant team in that kind of way. But 100 Thieves is complete cannon fodder at this tournament. I think BLG will have no problems. And then we get to really the most interesting matchup of this first day, Hanwha Life Esports taking on Anyone's Legend. To me, this is obvious. HLE is the better of these two teams. I think AL is in worse form than people give them credit for going into this tournament, if we're being entirely honest. Not that I think they're the worst team of all time or anything like that, but rather, this is not a team that I'm sitting here expecting to dominate at this tournament. I think that there is a non-zero chance that they end up missing the quarterfinals if everything goes wrong, and this is the kind of draw that you don't want to get if you're AL. I mean, maybe you do because it means you can't play Hanwha Life later on in the tournament when you need to qualify for quarterfinals, but HLE is a top 3 team at this tournament, and I think they will have a pretty easy time. And then the most fun matchup we could have gotten in the third one that I'm the most interested by, Vivo Keedstars taking on Team Secret Whales. Yes, please, one of these teams will be 1-0 after this series, and honestly, I think it's going to be Secret Whales. I think they end up picking up the victory here. Do I think it's guaranteed? No, but am I really really excited to see like Morteus versus Eddie. Yes, I'm actually really excited to see that Eddie carry matchup, and it's a really fun way for both of these teams to kick off their tournament because one of them actually gets a chance to shine. I think the LCP might be looking pretty good coming out of this 0-0 draw. I'm not quite sure there's another region that looks better coming out of this draw than they are. Unfortunately, they had to sacrifice PSG to do it, but it is what it is. And then the final matchup here, KT Rolster taking on Movistar Koi. This is a non-zero chance. Like, there's a non-zero chance Koi can actually pick up a win here. Like, actually be a team that goes 1-0 and be kind of okay, because I think JoJo is solid, and if he can neutralize the BDD matchup, if he can just go even in lane, like, there are places on the map that I think Koi can actually win. Like, there's a really strong argument that Koi's bot lane is better than KT Rolster's, especially, you know, when they step up in the big moments. But for now, I'm going to go with KT. I think BDD is by far the best player on the Rift, and I don't think JoJo is going to be able to equalize that mid lane matchup. So just as an overview, my projected winners here are going to be Gen.G, T1, Top Esports, CFO, BLG, Hanwha Life, Team Secret Whales, and then KT Rolster. Those are the teams that I'm expecting to go 1-0. Everybody I didn't name, I expect to go 0-1 in this first day. Let me know if you agree or disagree with those picks and those takes down in the comment section below. But that's going to do it. I do hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, leave a like. It really does mean a lot to me. Lets me know you guys are enjoying the content, and it does help get this video out to a lot more people, which I'm always very appreciative of. If you're new here, hit subscribe. We're doing daily coverage. Every single day that there are games, you will be getting a video like this a couple of hours after. Probably around this time. It will get posted most days, and hope that's all right for you guys. But it's going to be daily coverage here. If you enjoyed this video, you're going to enjoy the rest of this tournament as well. Hit subscribe and hit that bell so you can be notified when those videos do go live. But with all that being said, I hope you all are having a great day. Hope you continue to have a great day, and I will see you all